The most straightforward way to do this would be to just use one of the templates and expand on that with the logic that you want to use. I've covered that in a different topic in this playlist. However, if you wanted to start completely from scratch with a new map and everything, I'll be showing you how to do that in this video. We will be using some of the pre-made blueprints such as level pieces and characters, just so we don't need to program everything from scratch in this video, but we can go from an empty map and I'll show you the kind of process and layout that you'll take. So the first thing is to consider the folder structure, making sure that everything has its correct place. You always need to remember that the folders outside of the common assets can safely be deleted if you know that you're not going to need any of these. The common assets folder, though, inside of the endless runner creator folder is important to keep because that will have some classes, materials, meshes, and things like that, which will be referenced and needed throughout different parts of the logic in any kind of game that you create. So with that in mind, to make this a kind of safe and easy to update process, what I'd recommend doing is from the content folder directly, creating a new folder, and I'll call this one new game. And we're going to create everything inside of this folder structure. So again, it keeps everything separate if you ever wanted to remove something from the project to tidy things up a little bit later. Inside of the new game folder then, I'll create two new folders, one named blueprints and one named maps. I'll then press Ctrl and N to create a new map. I'm going to choose the default map. We can get rid of some of the things from this a little bit later, but this will give us a good starting point. And then I'll just be sure to save this back inside of that new maps folder I've just created, and I'll call this one new game map. So just a quick aside here as well, the default map for the project at the moment is going to be the game select. This will be the menu where you can pick from any of the games which have been included in the package as an example. What you may want to do in your project is remove this or replace it with something like a main menu, a splash screen, or something like that. So I'll leave this at the moment. We can just test everything directly from this map as we go through and make it though. Now, one of the first things that we'll need to control the kind of game flow of our level is going to be a new game mode. So we'll create a custom game mode specifically for what we're going to create here. So inside of the blueprints folder, I'm going to right click anywhere and go to the blueprint class option. Now the game mode that we want to use is going to inherit some of the logic that we already have readily available through the plugin. So I'm going to find the game mode game. Now game mode game is a child class of the BP underscore game mode base that handles things like saving and loading, and then the game mode game handles things like the type of character to spawn and other updates that will be made during gameplay. So if we derive our custom game mode from this, it means that we're going to have access to the save load, the character information and things like that, and then we can change or update anything that we need to inside of our own game mode that we're making now. So I'm going to call this one BP underscore game mode new game, and that will be fine. If we open up our new class, there are going to be a few things that we need to change here. So the first thing, and this is really important due to the custom character select system that's been included in the plugin, which kind of needs to avoid and override the default Unreal player spawning system. So we're going to actually come back in a bit later and remove the player start as well. But the reason for that is just because some of the logic which is happening kind of behind the scenes can confuse things and override some changes, even if you store them in the game instance between levels, when you're trying to allow a character select screen or something in this example. So what we're going to do to bypass this completely is make sure that we press the X on the default pawn class so that this reads none. And the way that we're going to set which pawn we want to control in the game, we're going to change just here the game type pawn class to a pawn that will fit the kind of game that we're making. So I'm going to recreate the roadrunner game. So I'll go for the BP underscore player roadrunner. This means that when we use this, we'll have the lane switching functionality ready to go, which is going to be a nice simple one to work with. With those changes made, that should be our game mode ready to go. So what we need to do now is inside of every map, because the default map for the project is the game select, in every map that I've created for the different templates for the lizard runner, roadrunner, and things like that, we're overriding the default game mode here in the blueprint selection. So we're going to go down to the game mode, and we'll override this to be our new game mode game, or game mode new game. So that's the one that we've just created, which means now when we press play, this will use this game mode. And the important thing, for the moment at least, is that we're going to be selecting the player roadrunner as the default player. Now this is going to be looking for a custom player start, which we'll go in and replace now. And the easiest way that we can do that is we can just select our player start this in the world. We'll go to the common assets folder. We'll go to blueprints and then the game folder. And in here we can find the BP_runner player start. So this is the custom player start that we're going to want to use. If we select this and then right click on the player start, we can choose to replace that with the selected actor, and that will bring that in at the correct location. Basically, the game mode is looking for one of these objects in the world as the place to spawn our selected player. If we haven't selected someone before in the kind of main menu system or something, then it will just default to whatever you've selected here. However, as an example, if you did have a character select screen and you'd chosen, let's say, the lizard runner for your character on this map, then that's going to be saved in the game instance. And instead of spawning the roadrunner here, this will spawn the lizard runner character. So if we press play now, we should actually have our player coming in. It's a little bit hard to see here because we were just put straight into the smoke. We're not going to get control, there's going to be a few errors, and this is fine. There's still a few other classes that we need to set up and get ready before this is going to be playable. But this is just showing that the character spawning system is working, that game mode is being used, and just a quick example again. That is definitely the roadrunner particles and everything being spawned correctly, so we've got the correct character coming in now as well. So one of the main errors that we're getting here is that we need a level manager ref, and this is a class which is controlling a lot of the main features and functionality of your chosen game type. So if we come back into the game folder, this is actually where we need to be again, so we can drag in the BP_level manager. Now this isn't important, but just to make things easy to find, I'm going to make sure this is centered on the y-axis. We're going to be playing everything scrolling backwards this way. And the way that this class is working, basically, this will house information about the level bounds, so where things go out of bounds, where things can start being recycled, when those objects or obstacles, level pieces, things like that are out of bounds. It will also provide a location to store them, so this is to avoid you being able to see things pop in and out of existence, while still reusing and pooling things to avoid the need of creating and destroying functions. We can set things like the countdown time before the level starts, the respawn delay, the level movement speeds, and everything like that from the level manager. So the first thing I'll do is I'll set some level manager speeds. So if we set the initial speed here, I'm going to go with some completely arbitrary values, but the initial speed is how fast the level will start moving when you press play, so I'm going to set this to 500. The maximum speed is where this will cap the level movement, so we can increment this over the time to create some kind of difficulty increase. Again, arbitrary, but I'll set this to 2000. And then the speed acceleration is the speed at which this will increase over time. And I'm going to set this to 100, which is actually going to be quite a fast increase. You'll noticeably see this happening. And that's kind of what I want just to demonstrate this. So you may want to make this a bit smaller in your game. Otherwise, you're going to reach 2000 very, very quickly. Then the important thing down here is we have the level movement direction. So this is going to be the direction in which the level pieces are scrolling or moving. The update functionality only accounts for X and Z movement. Y has been removed for code simplicity and readability. So it just means that you would need to adjust where the camera's facing if you want to kind of fake a direction, but it does support full Z and kind of vertical movement as well. And you can have a look at the vertical runner game type to see how that works. For this, I'm going to set the level movement direction to -1 on the x-axis, which will be scrolling towards where I'm going to place the camera in a moment. Next, just inside of the billboard here, so this is the level manager billboard. I've just created these to make things a little bit easier to see, a little bit easier to find, and you can quickly find, move these around, and change things in the editor. But just inside of this, you can see the vector widgets have also been exposed for the bound scale and the object pooling location and things like that. Again, so that we can easily grab these and move these where we want them to be in the level. So again, working with the x-axis, I'm just going to change the location for the out of bounds box. So this is going to be where objects will reach when they're moving, and at this point in the world they'll be classed as out of bounds, so not visible or usable in the game. And kind of similar, we have the disabled pooled objects location as well. So this doesn't have to be done, but I generally place this just behind the out of bounds location, just so that I know, again, that this will not be in the camera viewport and we won't see things moving around. And then finally, I'm just going to set the out of bounds box scale, which is this box here. So this is just a collider. And as I said, as objects are moving backwards across the screen, as soon as they hit this, they will be out of use, they'll be disabled in the object pool and put over here. And then when a new object is needed of that type, the object pool will manage that and probably spawn it in somewhere over here in front of the player. Again, hopefully out of screen so we don't have any kind of pop-in issues. So we're getting close to having something kind of playable now. The next thing is we're going to want something, I keep mentioning the camera, we're going to want a camera for the player to look through. So if we come over and find our camera actor, I'm going to drag this in. I'll just move this back. Again, I'll put this on the Y location, drag this up a little bit and just rotate it to look at the player start. Again, always keeping in mind that we have this in front of the out of bounds location and especially the out of bounds pulled object location. Then also come down and set this to auto activate for the player. And this means now if we press play, we will have the game starting. We have the score going up. We have an issue over here where that's the wrong tip for the game type, but we can move the player around exactly as I would expect. So we can now start kind of level dressing our game. So we can start putting in the spawners to create the levels, obstacles, and pickups. So the first thing is we can remove some of the unneeded things. We don't need fog, the reflection sphere, or the default floor piece here. Instead, what we're going to do is navigate to the spawning folder, again, still inside of the common asset. So again, these are all things that will be needed in all of the different templates I've created. So don't remove anything from these folders. Inside of the common folder, blueprints and spawning, we can drag in a BP spawner level piece base. I'm just going to put this at 0, 0, 0 on the location. And we may need to move this a little bit higher or lower to meet the player starts, but we'll see how that looks when we get things spawning in. So again, we can see the level spawner here has its own billboard. You can control these over here in the spawner type just to make things a little bit easier again to find and see what they are. The level manager is actually set up in the construction script, so that will always override itself to come back to be the level manager billboard. But this one we're going to leave as the level spawner. Then to set this up, we want to select the type of actor this will spawn. So for this is going to be the roadrunner level piece. So we've got the level piece roadrunner, and you can also add some side pieces as well, which will be the decoration. For this, we'll just stick very simply with the level piece just so that we have a kind of game bounds to work with him. And then the actors required is going to be the number of actors spawned in the editor or at runtime to kind of fill that camera space. So this will be the objects which are pulled. So I'm going to set this to 5, that should be perfectly fine. And we can easily test this, and I'll show you how to do that in the editor to get an idea of whether this will or won't work before pressing play. Then the options just below this, we have the spawn new actors if required. So if the game starts speeding up and 5 actors are not enough to be reused from the object pool, so if more things are being trying to be moved than are available as disabled pullable objects, then this will allow you to automatically spawn the correct number of floor pieces to let the level keep running without the player seeing any kind of holes or gaps in the level movement. Then we have the option for moving children, so we're going to need this to be ticked because we will want the floor to be moving forward. You can untick this if you want to save a little bit of performance. If you have something which doesn't have a texture, for instance, will be used just as decoration and doesn't necessarily need to look like it's moving, then you can set this to be a non-moving object. And then the option here for the spawn new actors on begin play is to allow you to completely randomize things every time you press play, because like I'll show you in a moment, we can use the editor visualize buttons down here, which are just some editor functions I've included. But if you don't always want to default to what you've been working with in the editor, then you can tick this to have something spawn completely randomly on begin play. To avoid that initial performance hit though, you could always just test things in the editor and let the player start with that setup. And then finally, we're going to need a reference to the level manager for some of the communication that's happening when you use these editor functions down here. So we've already got our level manager, we can drop this down and select that. Now if we hit editor visualize level, that will spawn the 5 pieces that we've assigned just here. We can then look through the camera and we can confirm that that will in fact cover all of the space that we need it to. We could probably use a little bit less in this case actually. We could probably turn this down to 3 because the camera is quite close. So if we visualize that again, check for the camera, and again we can still see that nothing is out of view. If we press play, that's moving as we would want it to. The dropping animation there is working, and the dropping in is also, the popping up is working in the front there. So this is definitely a good start. If you wanted to completely remove everything, you can press the editor clear level. If you don't have anything in the visualization stages here and you press play, then this kind of overrides that thing I was just talking about. So even if you don't have spawn new actors on begin play, of course, we never want the level to be completely bare. So if you press play and you haven't tested anything, this will spawn some default actors for you anyway. So one of the other things I mentioned which is wrong is that the hold left mouse button to drag is incorrect. It's actually A and D to move left and right in this because it's lane based. So we can see there that we are getting the wrong hint. That is controlled through the level manager. The way that we can manage this is taking the game type that is currently being played and it is showing the hints for the voxel runner. We just want to change this to roadrunner. If we press play, that is now saying A and D to move left and right, which is correct. And the reason I've set it up this way, these are basically used. You can change these enums and some of the data files to check whether you're playing on a desktop or a mobile device, and it will change the hints depending on the platform you're playing on. So although at the moment, because this is worked out we're playing on the desktop, it's saying press A and D. If you launched the same game now on mobile, it would say tap the left or right side of the screen to move left and right. So that's all that's for, is just to automate the hints that are being displayed on the side just here. Now we've still got another warning coming up, and that's about the post-process volumes. In a similar way that the tips are working, we can also automate the post-process effects we're using. Now the easiest way I would say to do this, and just have something in the level manager to use here, is to go to one of the existing templates. So I'm just going to go back to the roadrunner here. I'll save that to make sure we don't lose anything. And this is just because I've made two post-process volumes here. You can then tweak and modify these to look as you want your game to look. But we have our post-process desktop and post-process mobile. All the level manager will do is disable one and use the other, depending again on the platform you're working with. And this is just because some features obviously are not enabled on mobile devices, so you may want to swap things out a little bit. Now another thing just to mention, because we have the full level here, there's another feature you can do from the level manager as an editor functionality, and that is to update all of the visuals. So you can see we've got the level pieces very similar to what we've just created. You also have these side pieces, and that is coming from the spawner level side. This is very similar to the level piece spawner we've just selected. The only difference, I've selected to use the BP underscore level hill flappy runner because I've actually set things up in a way to use the same background information. Again, just to save the amount of assets that are coming in to the project when you download this. But what this is doing is controlling these around the side. And if you wanted to randomize things a little bit during before gameplay again, you can come to the level manager and use the editor update all level visuals. And this will just respawn everything, update the object pools, just so you can check that things are kind of randomly being spawned where you want them to. Because, for example, even though it's happening to the road pieces, these are all exactly the same, so you can't tell, whereas you can tell the scenery is being changed. Okay, so back to the post-process volumes though. What I'm going to do is just select both of these, press Control in C, and then return to our new map that we've been working in. Press Control in V, that will bring both of these in. You can see that the desktop one I think has just been used by default. They're set to infinite bounds, so this will work anywhere. And what we want to do is get our level manager and select the desktop version for the desktop slot and the mobile version for the mobile slot. And this will now definitely default to using the desktop version here, and it will get rid of the last of those warnings. So this is now playable, this works, we've got the right tips, we can pause and go back to other menus. This misses out one thing that we need though, and that is a kind of game loop. At the moment we only have pickups, which are being spawned from the floor piece here. We of course want to add some obstacles. So this is the final example of spawners we can use. We can go back to the common folder, the blueprints and spawning. I'm going to go to the spawner base and drag one of these in. Again, I'm going to place this at 0 on the Y. I want to make sure this is in front of the player on the X and at the same level on the Z. So for the player, I'm just going to set this to 100 on the Z, so we know that's where the player starts, and then 100 for the spawner here. And then I'll just move this forward a bit. Now these, I think I've animated these so that it kind of looks fine that these appear because they're going to drop down from the sky. So this can appear a little bit closer than everything else. I also want 3 of these and to space them I think 100 units apart on the Y-axis. But before creating any duplicates, we'll set this up again so we have the correct information. So we want to make sure we have a reference to the level manager. We want the The spawner type to be obstacle, just so again that this is showing the correct billboard. We have the actor that we want to spawn. This is going to be the roadrunner obstacle. So the BP underscore obstacle roadrunner. Again, I'll set the actors required here to 5. And then for the spawn offsets, this is going to be the location they spawn. I actually want these to spawn exactly where the spawner is. We don't want this to be any further forward or back or left or right, because this is lane based, so we want to make sure they're always appearing directly in front of one of the lanes. And then we do want to set some minimum and maximum spawn delays. So this is obviously going to be how long the first object will take to spawn, and the time picked randomly between that float and another before the next one is spawned. So this is just, again, to control the difficulty a little bit. And then we've got the absolute lowest and the absolute maximum. So this will update over time. Again, as the difficulty is increasing, you're going to increase the number of things that you're spawning, but you don't want them ever spawning constantly. So the minimum amount of delay between one thing spawning and the next is 1 second. If you put this too low, it will just kind of stack them and you'll have a long line of obstacles. We've got the same options as we had here for the level. So we will spawn new actors if required. Of course, if the level starts speeding up, we're going to need more, and 5 obstacles just might not be enough. We do want these to move. Again, these are going to be scrolling towards us, and we don't need these to spawn on begin play. This will be done as and when the obstacle spawner decides an obstacle is needed based on this information just here. So now we have that set up. We can create by Alt and dragging the location. We can create our duplicate obstacle spawner and then one to the right as well. I think the lanes are 250 units apart, but we can test this when we see these dropping in. So the first ones are taking at least 3 seconds. We can see there some of those are a bit too fast and they are too close together. So just for reference, you can always drop back in, like I said, to the existing maps, which is a nice easy way to see how things are working. So I'll just save that. These are indeed 400 units away from each other. And we can see the spawn delay offsets I've created here are a little bit different, so there's some staggering between them. So what I'm going to do actually is I'll just copy, we can see the general idea, but I'll just copy these, come back into our map. I'll remove these for now and paste these in. Now the location is going to be way too far away, so I'm just going to drag these forward, and that should now be perfectly fine. There was a warning there just saying that the level manager has already recognized these as spawners. The level manager will pass some information off during gameplay, so it will have some information about the actors it will be talking to in the level, but we can safely get rid of that because again it will clear that array and find it based on the new spawners we have in, and we can just test this again to see if this works. So it should now be in the correct place, and there we go. So that's dropping from the sky. It's a little bit too close because I have the camera too close and possibly the player too close to the camera. But of course, it's the tweaking and refinements like that you'll be doing for your own game anyway. So an easy fix here would just be looking at it to drag the camera up and back a bit. Again, made much easier if we have the level, so we have a good idea of where things are, so we can visualize the level. Then take the camera. We can see how far back we can make this. We can probably make it a bit higher, and I think the player could be closer. That also means that we can move these back. And that would just give the player some time to realize that something's dropped into the world. And there we go, we can avoid those a little bit more easily. And then the pickups and everything are kind of happening, like I said, that's all happened and housed inside of the level piece functionality here. So they're the general classes that you'll need though to get any of your own game types working. So the main thing is knowing how to work with the game mode, the level manager and the spawners. And from that you can start customizing your own level piece blueprints, your own obstacle blueprints, and really go wild with what you want to spawn in. And as I said, I would definitely recommend keeping some of the templates in the project until you know a little bit more about how things work and are coming to tidying up the project and getting rid of all of the unused content. It's super useful to be able to just come in, even as I've worked on this for months making this, I sometimes forget what a class does or how it should be set up, and I come back and reference my own setups here to see what kind of ideal scenario for a class placement would be in the world. So I definitely recommend keeping these in and using them as a reference as you get used to working with the plugin. And that was just a quick demonstration in the background I wanted to finish off on, just to show you we now have the full game loop working, so we can pick up the collectibles, we can press play, we can pick up the collectibles, and of course we can hit an obstacle, which will bring us to the end of the game and bring up the game over menu.